Ripe Fruit is a nonprofit education initiative dedicated to identifying and strengthening innate skills as they appear along the spectrum of ways we think and learn. Our mission is to infuse mainstream learning with enhanced curriculum, customized lesson plans, and demonstrated creative systems. We aim to foster comprehensive learning, enthusiasm, and confidence for all students. The DEI+N Talks serves as a conduit, think tank, and intensive to discuss how to identify and support unique learning styles. All systems are go. The DEI+N Talks starts now. Welcome to the Working in a Neurodiverse Universe edition of the DEI+N Talks. We exist to position neurodiversity in the diversity, equity, and inclusion conversation. My name is Stephen King, and I will be your host, and I will host a diverse group of panelists. Now, we're doing this for research purposes. Our position is that the more diversity of opinion and perspective we have represented, the stronger our collective knowledge will be. This view expressed and the views expressed during the DEI+N Talks or Creative Kid podcast do not necessarily reflect the views of Ripe Fruit Foundation, Ripe Fruit Creative, hosts, or sponsors. This information is not intended to replace therapeutic or medical advice. For the purposes of this conversation, neurodiversity is defined as diversity of ways we think, act, and learn. When we intend to reference a particular diagnosis, you will hear that specifically. This session is being recorded. As far as closed captioning goes, if you refer to the closed captioning defaults that you have on your devices, then you will be able to access closed captioning in this broadcast. If you are not able to access closed captioning in this broadcast, closed captioning will be available in the post-recorded link of this broadcast. To begin, let's get started, folks. Here's a video giving us a snippet of a day in the life of one neurodiverse person. There are hints of social anxiety, ADD, autism, and other ranges of emotion and stimuli.
I caught you. Just wanted to catch up with you about the paper we were discussing the other day, the proposal of century. I think this draft is really coming on. I think there's quite a few things in here that we need to double check. There's some stuff in the scope that I think needs fleshing out a bit, maybe make it a bit smarter, stuff that we've discussed. And there's some of the stuff around cost benefit I think we need to double check here as well, because there's some bits in here that I can't remember exactly where. There's somewhere in here, and if we can bring them on to that's quite a strong proposition. Sorry to sort of jump in, you can't catch up later. I just noticed that sounded like an awful lot of information. It was quite complicated. Just wondering if I could help you perhaps run through the report. We can break it down a little bit, make it a little bit more easy to read and run through. And then if you've got any questions, you can ask me while I'm there. What do you think?
Okay, so that was a video that showed a perspective of a lot of stimulation. It had noises that were coming in, and that was to give an idea of what life could be like for a neurodiverse person. Everything from walking into the building to having a conversation with their boss, and then just trying to process that information. That's why it had a lot of beeps and a lot of whirls, and it was very disjointed, because in some cases, that is what that experience is like. And what we're trying to do is highlight how a neurodiverse experience can be filtered so that the person experiencing that can get the most out of whatever their experience may be. Now, if you want to hear a personal account from someone who is neurodiverse talking about their experience in the workplace, we're going to place a link in the chat. Right now, though, let's begin our introduction of our panelists, and very esteemed panelists, I might add. And we're going to start with Nomita Advani. Nomita is a licensed art therapist with 14 years of experience with children and adults in clinical and community-based settings. She brings 15 years of experience instructing students with learning disabilities, including ADD, dyslexia, speech and language disabilities, motor skill developmental challenges, and memory and processing challenges, as well as 10 years of experience as a visual art department chair heading a K-12 visual arts program. Ms. Advani employs talk therapy and art therapy with clients. She conducts trainings, workshops, and presentations on art therapy to a variety of audiences, including mental health and education professionals. Next is Tanasia Hazelton. a DEI specialist and master social worker who helps shape edifying organizations for the good of all people and outcomes. She has helped innovative, inclusive education by directing a program for English learners or developing diversity, equity, and inclusion training and program infrastructure with the University of Maryland. Whether through her business, Infinitely Impactful Solutions, or more long-term organizational partnerships, she always looks for opportunities to authentically and sustainably advance equity in our society. Her philosophy, equity is a value that's inscribed in her DNA. Also, we have Kelly Ann Few. Ms. Few has over 20 years of experience as a civil environmental engineer and program manager. Her ability to explain, defend, negotiate, and coordinate program policies and activities with a variety of stakeholders has resulted in the successful organizational balance of mission and environmental sustainability. Her practices, working with businesses and organizations to heighten clarity, sustainability, and a path to success. We also have Nicole Fall. Nicole is an artist educator based in Baltimore. She collaborates on public art with communities, including Access Art and Morrell Park Elementary Middle School, Brooklyn O'Malley Boys and Girls Club, and Washington Very Special Arts, School for the Arts and Learning. Nicole holds a BFA, MICA, and MFA from Towson University. Those are some of her degrees. She has taught for 30 years in a variety of educational settings, including associate professor at Baltimore City Community College, Loyola University, founding teacher, George Washington Carver Center for the Arts and Technology, and other Baltimore City and county schools. She has also been an arts administrator, and her mission is to enhance creative thinking and making skills for as many people as possible in order for further empowerment of their critical thinking, grit, and agency. And then there's me, Stephen King, your host. I'm a professional facilitator, partner at Right Fruit Creative. I'm a hospitality and etiquette strategist, an ideation coach, author, and a philosopher. Yes, of course. And we have Ebony Kinney with us, and Ebony is a designer and researcher. She spent over 20 years interviewing people to understand their needs and their dreams. She founded rightfruit.org as a way to inform and enhance curriculum development and confidence in all learners. She holds an MA in design from the University of Baltimore and leads software production design teams as a usability analyst for a federal agency full-time. She draws her insight from a keen understanding of the scientific method and uses this approach, and she uses this approach in her creations. So now we're going to head into our panel discussion. We're going to discuss our big hits and takeaways at the end, so certainly take notes. Please capture what comes up for you as we discourse so we can discuss it fully. That's why we're here, for you to participate. And you can feel free to put questions in the chat or raise your hand to engage with us during the session. So what we'll do is just kind of go through and gauge each of your reactions to the video that we just showed. What does it highlight for you? So we'll start with Nomita Advani. Nomita, what did that video expose to you?
It really reminded me of the students I've worked with, as well as the clients, and what can happen if an environment doesn't suit what they need. It can make them really dysregulated. And when someone becomes dysregulated, which means that you know, like we saw the heart rate going up or some kind of internal system gets sort of disturbed, then you have to focus on that. And you can't really focus on what you need to in your work or school environment. So it is really, really important to make sure that we are matching the environment to the needs of everyone that exists in that environment, whether it's a workplace or whether it's in a school system. Okay.
And let's move to Nicole Fall. Nicole, what did you see there?
Well, as someone who's somewhat neurodiverse myself, and I think a lot of us have felt this, where there's too much going on and you feel very overwhelmed. And it reminds me also of teaching and really being sensitive and aware to how students are responding to their environment, and to just be aware and figure out how to make it workable for them. So it just reminded me of everything that students have put up with, and really reminding teachers to be more aware of their students.
Okay. I also think that it just shows how every experience from each individual is going to have some different nuances. And since we don't really understand those nuances, I think it is important to have a base kind of way to communicate, which is where that general neurodiversity conversation kind of starts. And then as we proceed, through that conversation, we then kind of move into different lanes of topics of neurodiversity. Ebony Kinney, I'm certainly interested in what you thought about that video.
It's just a reminder to me to just look through the eyes of the actual user. Of course, I'm going to say it through the lens of the user, but the person who's having the experience, because I probably would make assumptions, even after watching the video from their view, make assumptions about, oh, well, everyone doesn't feel all of those things. And the truth is, I don't know. I'm not that person. And it's just a constant reminder. We don't know what that person's experiencing. Let's not try and make assumptions about it. Only thing we can do is ask them and try and engage them. That one friend who kind of took that moment to say, that was a lot, can I help you? Instead of being scared of what that response would be. I thought that that's something that we could all do to be a little bit more human. So it was humbling to watch.
Okay. And we have Kellyanne Few next. Kellyanne, what's your takeaway?
Yes, as I think about neurodiversity in the workspace, I often think of the responsibilities of leadership and managers to work with their staff and identify how that built environment is having an impact on how they perform. And so when I look at that scenario, I believe that as we're more in these co-working spaces, these open space offices that have been deemed appropriate, maybe it's not as effective as we think because we're creating distractions in that built environment. So I believe that there's a responsibility for leadership and managers to create some sense of etiquette rules or some sort of guidelines. So how, not only from the management point of view, but from the coworker point of view. So it was interesting and a good place to start the discussion around your universe that you're creating. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And now we have Tanasia Hazelton. Tanasia, what did you see there?
I got overstimulated myself. I had to kind of step back a little bit from it, but I come to this conversation with a background in education and social work and DEI specialization, but also as a person with ADHD and bipolar disorder. And I recognize pretty much all of the different parts of the video that were going on. The sound was like very jarring, like hearing the music going on the whole time. And I'm like, why are they playing this music? And then I remembered, like, I call it elevator music. Sometimes in my mind I just have a track, at least 1 or 2 tracks all day in the background, just like that song was going on. I was like, oh, that's their elevator music, right? So I found it to be a very, it definitely compounded like a myriad of challenges that people who experience different parts of neurodiversity experience. And it may not all be present at the same time like that, but I understand that it was a demonstration as well. So I thought it was very accurate and effective in helping people to put people in the shoes of a person who experiences those things.
Okay, thank you very much. That was well said. Dorothy Fall, you saw that video. What did you think? You have to take yourself off mute.
I think Dorothy actually is a guest. And
Oh, she's a guest? Okay. All right, very good. So as we, and again, Dorothy, that's fine. You don't have to say anything. We certainly don't want to compel any of our guests to speak, but this is an engaging conversation and you're certainly welcome to chime in if you want. You can use the chat, or you can certainly raise your hand. Let's continue with the conversation. Now I'll give my 2 cents here. What I saw there in that video was just a lot of competing stimuli. And I think that leads to our next question, which is, and we'll just kind of have the panel respond as they want. Is a corporate environment healthy for someone that's neurodiverse? And that is really the core question. We gave an example in the video of what could be considered a standard, fast-paced corporate environment, from the entrance all the way through to the meeting, all the way through to the boss coming in and talking, and then you're just left there kind of reeling, and then maybe your friend comes over and says it's going to be okay, but maybe your friend doesn't come over. And is that part of the corporate environment, having a friend that leaves their corporate workspace and comes over to kind of coach you and counsel you about your experience? So once again, for the panel, is the corporate environment healthy for someone that's neurodiverse? And what are some of the things that we can do to make the environment more healthy for a neurodiverse individual? Anyone want to comment on that?
I'll start. I think the contemporary corporate environment can work very well for someone who's neurodiverse, especially the younger corporate environments such as Google and places like that, where they have different places that you can work in. So you can work in a quieter environment if you need to. And for some people who are obsessed with detail, that can work into a corporate job that has to do with checking information. So I think that there are plenty of places for someone who's neurodiverse to work in corporate America.
Okay, and we are talking specifically in this session about working in a neurodiverse environment. And what does that mean? As we use the panel's experience over the years, and we have many, many years of experience compiled on this panel, what have you seen? Has the corporate environment adapted? We just kind of heard from Nicole saying that there is some adaptation there. Does anyone want to comment on how we can continue to adapt a corporate environment for a neurodiverse person?
I'll comment. I'll go back to my comment on creating guidelines and etiquette. And really, what I see is that employers are taking steps to accommodate needs of their employees, because they understand that impacts performance. So I believe that encouraging team members, leaders, to create those ground rules that respect the need to work, respect the need to perform. So I believe that, yes, we can expect diversity in corporate situations, because that's just the way we are wired as managers and leaders, to create the environment that we know will lead to the positive outcomes. So I believe that this discussion should continue around creating guidelines on how to create that place to serve as placemakers for a neurodiverse staff, and recognizing that everyone has some level of difference in the way they approach work and fun and interactions, etc.
Okay, so what I saw, and it is the opportunity for perhaps the manager to have the conversation with the team member in the manager's office. And I think having that separation would allow, one, it would close off some of that side stimulation and just noise. And two, it would give that more personal manager-employee dynamic that I think would, could foster that manager being aware of what makes each one of us unique and diverse. So that's one of my observations. Does anyone else have any observations based on that video that they would change from what they saw to maybe help promote our neurodiverse agenda? Okay.
One of
Well,
the oh.
Oh, go ahead, please.
I was gonna. I like that you talked about having that one-on-one conversation. The manager actually having that one-on-one conversation with the employee, and I think one of the barriers that comes with being able to have that is sometimes managers don't know what to say or unaware that people are having this type of experience, and so I think that there should be even more coaching for the coaches. As well, and that's a series that I've been working on, is how can we reshape and edify employee evaluation and also coaching, so that we have these not only metrics for how they're doing, but also are able to delve more into what their experience is like, and how they may be experiencing some of these challenges with neurodiversity. And also giving options is really important. Being in the corporate environment directly may be better for one person, and being remote may be better for one person, or a person may be able to handle it or be more ready to handle it and perform their best in the environment directly a couple days a week, versus being remote other days of the week. So I think it's, as we go forward in the accessibility conversation, it's important to prioritize giving options, and not, and we may be thinking we're doing the best we can by saying, hey, all neurodiverse team members, just work remote, but that's not the same for everybody. So giving options and also continuing to coach our coaches on how to have these types of sessions and one-on-ones is really important.
Okay. I was thinking that when we're talking about, the corporate environment, and again, this conversation is about, neurodiversity in the workplace. When it comes to hiring, what is it that we need to keep in mind when it comes to the conversation about neurodiversity? And I think that, to me, I see kind of two frames of thought. I see a neurodiverse conversation, which is kind of all-encompassing. In other words, we are all neurodiverse. And then I see that conversation moving into certain lanes of neurodiversity that may be explained in different ways, whether it be ADD, whether it be autism, or what have you. And if we use the term diagnosis, for example, we're not using that term to give any particular weight to the conversation to say that you are more diverse here or there because of a diagnosis. We're simply using that word so that we can continue to have the conversation. And one of the things that I think that we have to be super aware of is that the terms in this conversation are kind of always changing. And we need to be aware of that. And that in itself is an indication of diversity in communication and neurodiversity in general. So when we talk about hiring someone, what do we need to keep in mind? And is shame something that we're aware of in this conversation? In other words, what did I just say? And how did I say it in a way that is, I guess, politically correct? Does anyone have any feedback on the hiring of someone with neurodiversity and how that factors into the corporate environment?
I think shame is a part of the conversation in the sense that I think there's this environment of, I've identified what this thing is and I'm going to call it when I see it, and I see this in you, and let's have an open talk and conversation about it. And that's not always the direct reaction. I think that we have to evolve to it. So I think to the part that you asked about, is shame a part of the conversation? I think it is. Maybe we don't call it shame. We're in this post Brene Brown, where we embrace shame. But I do think that the sensitivity around it is definitely a part of it.
Well, are people becoming more sensitive to diversity? And if we kind of go and look at the diversity conversation, it was a diversity conversation which kind of started with, let's go along cultural and racial lines. Let's make sure that we are not turning anyone off because of where they come from or because of a dialect, and that everyone brings something to the table. Then it went from this kind of visual diversity to now we are in this space of mental diversity. And that is where the neurodiverse conversation really comes into play. My experience, as I've just looked at definitions, is we have this kind of neurotypical, which would be maybe considered neuronormal. So what would that look like? So just for the purpose of the conversation, we'll say that neurotypical is the ability to have a zoomed out view and then zoom in on a view and look, go to a very finite view and then zoom back out as needed. Neurotypical, kind of like how your eye, how your pupil dilates when light shines on it and light is not on it. You can see it, moving, opening and closing, opening and closing. So in the context of neurodiversity and thought, we're zooming out and zooming in as needed. As we move along different lanes of neurodiversity, I think the ability to zoom in and stay zoomed in becomes more pronounced. So to me, it's how do you see and discover what could be a genius that can zoom in on something and maybe take a helicopter ride around New York City and see the skyline and then turn around and paint that exactly as it is seen. That, to me, I can't do it. I mean, I certainly can't do it. That is, to me, an example of what could be considered genius. And what that is zooming into that picture, zooming into the painting, zooming into the ability to reproduce that, as opposed to maybe zooming out and zooming in as much. And I think when we start having the conversation and putting these lanes up so that we can end up in different lanes of perception and how neurodiversity manifests itself, we can then begin to change the terms and make those terms more, I guess, user-friendly, and start to drop the shame that may be associated with those ending terms, because we start the conversation with we're all neurodiverse. And when using that in the workplace, I'm now looking for those creative people who can paint and who can draw and who can do those things, because that's what I sell. If I'm a graphic company, that's my business. So how do we identify those people, and how do we move away from you're tested as a genius because these points on a test, when there's certainly other ways to measure genius? And I think that's where we're headed with this conversation. Nomita, I see you nodding over there. So do you have something to contribute?
Yeah, I think it's all actually connected. It kind of goes in a cycle. So if we're talking about the system that creates the environment, that creates what the person can then produce or not produce based on that environment. So it kind of keeps going in a cycle. And when I think of the workplace, say in education, which is my experience really, not the corporate world, but the education world, the thing I hear teachers say so often is so when, for example, if we're talking about the management who then creates that environment that allows us to know what people need, the conversation has to be had with the people that they're trying to serve, if you will. So teachers will always say, we don't always get asked what we need, and policies and things are put in place based on assumptions or just, whereas the teachers are the ones in the trenches. They're the ones working with the students. They're the ones observing what is working and not working, what the students need, but that's not always translated back into the system. So, bringing up the term shame, it really is directly related to judgment. If you feel judged, you feel shame. It's kind of that tends to be what's behind shame. And judgment comes from having a norm, right? If there's a norm and you're outside the norm, then I'm going to have to judge that. So I judge that, and then you feel, oh, I don't belong, or somehow I'm not okay, I'm not right. What I'm doing is not, fitting into the space. So I might be speaking to a few different things in my point, but really trying to say that it's all connected. So we have to be able to make sure that all of it is being addressed so that it all stays connected and the communication lines stay open, in that way. So we're making sure that when we're making the policies and the workplace is sort of trying to find, what do I do to make my place open to neurodiversity and to all of my employees and everyone that works here, that the information that has to come from who is working there, if that makes sense.
Sure, that absolutely makes sense. And I'm wondering now, how can neurodiverse people who have these, sometimes, brilliant skill sets, how can we find them? How can we locate them? How do we cast a net to get them to the interview so that we can get them hired and get them employed and use that that thinking out of the box concept for good and for our businesses? How do we recruit these people? And I think that is, a very interesting conversation. How do we get away from just saying what is quote unquote normal and move into how do we engage everyone for an interview like that? And I'll bring up something interesting. This is Ebony Kinney, actually. Ebony Kinney has a design agency. And Ebony, if you could, I think this is so interesting. You actually hired a designer that had some visual impairments. Talk about that a little bit.
Yes, I did. My story is I desperately wanted to work in an ad agency and have that experience, to burn out everything that was promised. And I did. And I got to the point where I was able to hire someone, a designer. And I was just hiring based off portfolio, personality, ability to kind of deal with adversity in the environment we were in. It was a smaller business. And I did end up hiring a young woman that I didn't know until after I hired her was partially blind. And it was, how close she would sit to the, she actually mentioned that she didn't drive, and she started to mention, I could see how close she sat to the computer screen, and I inquired about it. And she told me that, she's basically legally blind. So I just coming off of I'm going to go off of energy and talent and personality. And then we lived that whole experience out. Very great designer, great person. We still stay in contact.
Okay. And I think that is a testament to how we, in this initiative, the rightfruit.org initiative, which is, kind of, driving all of these sessions, we are really putting our money where our mouth is. We are actually doing these things. We are looking for diversity in all ways. Let me jump to the chat and ask, pose a question. And this question comes from Pat. It says, I hope we can take advantage of all that we've learned during the pandemic. Working at home during the pandemic has been a huge relief and also good for productivity for many neurodiverse people. How can we build support for work cultures that allow working at home in this time of return to office that is starting now and creating pressure on many people? Anyone from the panel want to jump in on that? Thank you, Pat, for asking the question.
Yeah, I think it is a question that's coming up now. And I know I've talked to many people who've been working from home this whole time, and they've gotten more hours back in their day because they don't have to commute. And so I can imagine for some neurodiverse people who want a non-distracting environment, that it does raise some anxiety about coming back to the office. And I'm not really sure. It'd be great since the corporations have learned flexibility because of the pandemic. Could they stay flexible in terms of, allowing people more flexibility in who works from home and who doesn't, especially now that we can all Zoom in on meetings and things like that.
So the next question is the telework experience, the working from home experience. And of course, I guess, as we stated earlier, it can be, good for some neurodiverse situations, and then it could be bad for some neurodiverse situations. So would anyone like to unpack that? Do we have any experiences where working from home has been positive And do we have any experiences where working from home has been negative? According to the question, it's been positive. It's, the home environment is a comfortable environment. The person's comfortable at home. Are we getting more productivity out of them because they're at home? And I know from my experiences as a manager that when we issued our employees cell phones, company cell phones, every time that they're at a stoplight, they're checking their emails. So we got a chance to really increase productivity by using technology. Are we applying technology? And right now we're saying, from home, are we applying technology in the best way that we can? And how can this technology continue to push this neurodiverse conversation? Any of our panelists want to comment on that?
I think it's important to understand both sides of the coin when it comes to working from home and telemarketing, telecommuting. Yes. I know that there are some individuals that need to be around people, need to be stimulated through movement and getting to the office. So we have to make sure when we develop a strategy around working from home, working remotely, that we consider both sides and give options, but we have to make sure that as corporations and businesses, they consider the bottom line. We don't just want to turn this into we're serving all employees in every way. We still have to be mindful that these are profit-making entities. So I want us to also be mindful when we create those strategies and guidelines that we consider all of those elements. So.
Interestingly enough, when it comes to what are some of the best practices, there are some people who certainly, thrive off of social interaction, being live, but there is a new virtual component. And that virtual component is what I call gamification. Excuse me. You take games like Call of Duty, you take games like PUBG, you take these games that are life simulation games like The Sims. And here we have a little virtual person that runs around and goes in and out of houses and goes in and out of offices, and they interact with other virtual people. I think it presents an opportunity for some neurodiverse folks to communicate in a way where they still have this, maybe in some cases they're really shy. But in a game environment, they're really boisterous or they're really engaging. So I think that we really have to use this technology and keep it innovative in this conversation so that we can accomplish, it can help us accomplish our goals, which is getting information out of people into the workplace specifically and using that. Just like you said, there's a bottom line involved with companies. And I think companies now see it's probably a little cheaper to have people work from home. And now I think we see that people are actually doing the work and being held accountable for the work that they're doing at home. I'll remind everyone to visit rightfruit.org. And I also want to remind everyone that these sessions are scheduled throughout the year. They're scheduled all the way through December. So you can go to rightfruit.org. You can check out the sessions that you're interested in. You can attend those sessions. And we're going to continue to push this very important initiative about neurodiversity, especially neurodiversity in the workplace. I'm going to throw a situation out there, which is if you get hired and you're masking at work, you're actually really masking at work because maybe you have movement issue, like you're always moving, you're always fidgeting or something along those lines, and you get hired based on you fill out all the questions correctly, you pass the interview, but as you continue working, more and more of some of your neurodiverse tendencies are manifesting, and now it's becoming apparent. These are things that I think we need to make the workplace sensitive about. These are things that say, well, yes, you may have movement over here from this particular person that that you don't normally see, but that does not mean that this person is not as effective in their job. So don't get distracted by that movement. I think that conversation should be brought to the forefront. Anyone have any comments about that?
Yes, I would say that Zoom is a perfect platform for being able to mask when you feel like you want or need to or want to feel more comfortable in the work environment. You can turn off your screen and still be present without people seeing you continually biting your lip or scribbling on your pad or eating Cheerios. If you need like a little pick me up, which I think we need a bit of a culture shift there, because you should be able to hydrate and keep yourself going, even if you are on a panel or presenting. So I love that feature where you can turn your screen on and turn your screen off. It's a really good accessibility feature.
So the virtual component is positive. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I do have Tourette's. I do have a mild form of Tourette's. So I've lived my entire life with movement that people didn't understand. But I want to bring it back to empowering individuals who have diverse neurodiversity to speak up and be proud of the characteristics that define them. So whenever I walk in the room, if my eyes are blinking, that doesn't have anything to, that does not in any way impact my ability to create innovative and creative solutions. So while we have to put some onus on those who create the environments, we need to begin to empower the individuals to say, I am. This is who I am, and this is how I'm going to show up, and let's proceed. So yes, I relate to that question.
Okay, we're going to jump into quickly. We're going to jump into the comments again, and we're going to answer a question that's posed by George. So George says, what is the role of human resources in ensuring accommodations are understood and implemented in the work environment? Thanks, George, for the question. Panel?
I was talking earlier about coaching the coaches, and I believe that a part of that is having, when we have keep record of these coaching sessions, whether it's employer, employee, etc., or evaluation sessions. It should be a part of the evaluation criterion for the employee and for the employer, and that talks about accessibility and accommodations for everyone, knowing what those needs are and how are they being met by the employer, and how's the employee feel about how those are being met, and HR looking at those evaluations, just like they will look at your metrics for performance. How is the accessibility going, accommodation? And that's a part of implementing DEI and accessibility into every part of our culture, even our evaluation forms and coaching forms.
That's outstanding, because it literally means that the good thing about a company is a company can tailor their experiences based on their needs. And I think the big takeaway here is that diversity is ultimately empowering, and neurodiversity is ultimately empowering. And we've had some very good examples in this particular session. And George, thank you for asking the question. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to go through the panel, and I'm going to ask each panelist what it is that they are up to, and what their contact information is. Now, we will also have this posted at rightfruit.org, but I just want to give each one of the panelists a chance to highlight some of their wins in what they're doing, whether it be their business, whether it be their websites, whether it be some of their projects. So I'm going to go through the panel right now, and we're going to start with you, Nicole Fall. What do you have going on?
Hi. So I'm a sculptor. I am currently working on a project at Brooklyn O'Malley Boys and Girls Club, working with the kids to design window grills, because they already have that institutional metal covering the windows. We wanted to give them that we're cutting out their designs out of metal, and those are going to be the window grills. So I worked with them for quite a while. My husband does the design end of it. And so we do have some windows up there already. If you're down in Brooklyn, Maryland, check them out at Garrett Park. I also work as a co-moderator for Liz Lerman's critical response process, which is a talk process. Look at when you want feedback on something, whether it's your cupcakes or your PhD thesis. So I do work around that. And I also do portfolio development for students wanting to go to arts high schools or even art college. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And once again, you'll be able to find information about Nicole at ripefruit.org. Nomita, tell us what you have going on.
So I'm an art therapist primarily and have a caseload of about 25 children, adolescents, and adults. And there's been, a lot of shifting going on in the last couple of years with the pandemic with my work. I do teletherapy now, so having to accommodate, art therapy through the screen has been, sort of the work I've been trying to reshape that, because it's less studio work and more sort of working with metaphor and visuals and things like that. I'm also really very much focused on self-awareness. And so I've been working on creating different evaluations and worksheets that can help and empower a person to really work through that self-awareness, finding everything about themselves, systematically looking at different aspects of us as human beings. And so I'm just kind of putting all of that together as to sort of enhance my work.
Okay, outstanding. And once again, ripefruit.org is where any of you can go to find out more about any of our panelists and to continue this conversation. We're moving on to Kelly Ann. Kelly Ann, let us know what you have going on.
Okay, well, I am a sustainability designer. And what that means is that I identify opportunities to help with a balance between community engagement, economic development, and any education, energy, or environmental solution. So right now I'm working with small businesses across the state of Maryland, and I'm helping them put a systems to how they run their business. So of course they could be profitable. So that's what I'm up to now. Thank you.
Okay, outstanding. And Tanasia Hazelton, what is going on with you right now that you want to share?
Thank you. Yes, I am currently and always working in my business, Infinitely Impactful Solutions. Where I specialize, I'm the founding solutions specialist, and I specialize in strategic impact planning and implementation for creators and organizations. And I'm also continuing my journey of I'm always learning and seeking to soak up information like a sponge. And so I'm actually in a certification program we're pursuing right now. It's called Embodied Social Justice. All of us here know how challenging and taxing it can be working in and being an advocate and activist for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so this certification is going to help me to be more sustainable in how I practice this. Burnout is so prevalent in our field. And so it's just a reminder for myself and all of us to continually be looking for ways to sustain these efforts for ourselves. In addition to those opportunities, I have recently transferred from my Master of Social Work program, which I finished not long ago, and I'm looking for long-term opportunities to make systemic change in the social sector in the realm of DEI. So those are some of the things that some opportunities I'm in and some opportunities I'm interested in pursuing as well. Thanks for asking.
Okay, thank you. And that is what our panel is up to. We certainly enjoyed having this panel present today. And I wanted to take a quick moment just to talk a little bit about what's coming up next month on our DEI+N Dean session. So in March 26th, actually, it's from stimulant overload to sensory friendly. And that will be our subject. And then in April, we'll do a virtual learning deep dive. And that's going to bring that virtual component up once again. And then in May, we'll have music, math, and patterns. So, and I'll tell you what will happen in May, for those of you that want to continue this journey with us. I, as a radio station program director, I was actually traumatized by music. And I know no one's ever heard that before. I mean, who has heard someone that's traumatized by music? Well, I was traumatized by music. And in May, when we talk about music, math, and patterns, I will unpack how I was traumatized by music. So you definitely want to stay tuned for that. I want to thank all of you for joining us. This has been the Dean session for today. This is our February Dean session that we are concluding. I certainly invite all of you to visit ripefruit.org. That's ripefruit.org for more information about our panelists and to find out more about our Dean sessions as we move forward. My name is Stephen King, and I'm signing off for me and with Ebony Kinney. And Ebony, what do you have to say in your closing remarks for this February session?
Well, this has been such an eye-opening and enlightening session. First of all, extreme gratitude to the entire panel for all of the insight, for the twists and turns we took just in beginning to unpack. That's what I got from this conversation. We're just at the surface, beginning to unpack what's out there for us. But major takeaways, thanks for everyone who attended, and just continue to stay tuned, continue to stay on the cutting edge. If there were things that spoke to you or things that didn't, reach out personally. We're just one email or, social media hit away.
All right. And with that said, I do want to remind everyone who is here about our social media, which is the social media for LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. It's Ripe Fruit Creative on social media, and search that and you will see a lot of content. We filled our social media up with some really great content. And remember, visit ripefruit.org. That's ripefruit.org for more information about upcoming Dean Talks and just to find out more about how we are pushing this neurodiversity initiative. That's ripefruit.org. I'm Stephen King. Thanks for joining us and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.